Well, hey guys, welcome to our book club meeting today. We're still reading The One Thing by Gary Keller. I feel like we've been in this for a while, but it's been so good. It's been so good to like take it at a good pace where not only is it not overwhelming in how much we're reading, but we can actually start applying the things that we're doing. So today, I love what we're looking at today because the section that we're looking at today, let me just turn to it so I can reference it. We've come through like the misconceptions, like what is it not? We've come through like, okay, so what is it? How do we do this? That's what we did last time. Now we're on part 3, extraordinary results, right? Unlocking the possibilities. And I love the fact that he like kind of builds this tower of 3 things. So living with purpose, right? Like what's that bigger purpose that we're called to? Because that is so important. We talk about that all the time in the Redeem Her Time community, right? If we don't know our bigger purpose, then we're going to kind of be like a ping pong ball or a pinball, maybe all over the place, just based on what kind of happens to knock into us next, right? The second one is living by priority, right? So once we know our purpose, we have to know, okay, so what really matters most in this season? And one of the misconceptions, if you remember from back in part 1, was that everything matters equally, because it doesn't. So sometimes we do have to learn how to prioritize, and we can't just try to do all the things because we're going to burn out, like we've talked about. And then the last one is living for productivity, right? Which I kind of changed that into purposivity, but here he ties it back into the purpose. I will let him have the word productivity here because that's really about being effective, right? And I know that that's our heart. Like we want to be effective. We want to be efficient. We only have so much time and energy because of our human limitations, that to be able to invest in these things that are a priority for the bigger purpose. And so I don't know about you, but I don't want to waste my time, energy, attention, affection on things that don't matter. I want to make sure that it's being funneled towards the things that do and towards that. So as I was thinking about this today, the passage from Colossians 3 came to mind. So I'm going to read this to you. Colossians 3:23-24 says, whatever you do, work it out with all your heart. Like that's where I think of like that productivity part. As for the Lord, right, there's our purpose, not for men, knowing that from the Lord, you will receive an inheritance as your reward because you are serving him, right? So that helps us to not only know our bigger purpose, to set our priorities and to be productive when we truly understand that this is in light of eternity, not just, the 80 something years that we're given here on this planet. So we're going to start off with that and kind of dive into then, okay, so how can we take this and with our biblical mindset and worldview, how can we apply this to the things that are in front of us? So I always like to start off just by asking if there's something that was like jumping off the page to you that you want to share, great. If not, I've pulled some different things kind of out of here that we'll go through and talk about. So is there anything that was just like really hit at your heart in 13, 14, or 15 that you want to bring to the surface?
Well, I know that we'll probably talk a little bit more about it later, but having set 4-hour time blocks.
Yeah.
So, and I have a plan in place already. So
nice. Yeah. So even though, yes, we'll get to that in just a minute, I want to hear kind of why did that stand out to you? Was that like in a good way that you heard 4 hours, or were you like, oh my gosh, no way could I give 4 hours to something? Or
it was a good thing because the problem that we have is like I've always heard time blocks and time block. The problem was how do I time block all these little tiny things? And to me, it seems too big and too overwhelming. And I don't know if I've ever, and if I possibly have, but you hear so much,
right.
Heard anybody say, just do a big time block.
Yeah.
And as soon as I read that, it went back to something that Andy, who's my COO, he sits 3 feet away from me. He said to me last week, he said, I've noticed by 1 o'clock, I'm done, I'm spent. And so we had a discussion about that. And so I really, truly feel like we have created a leadership team underneath us enough that they don't need to be in our office every 30 minutes like they think that they do. Most of the stuff they come to us is stuff they have the answers to. And so I discussed it because we were in St. Louis on Saturday, and I had my oldest son with us, and he got done playing his games at Dave and Buster and came and sat down with me. And so I was sharing him what I had read. And I told him, I said, starting next week, this is what I'm going to share with Andy is from 8:30 to 12:30, because we have managers that come in at 8, and sometimes there's just things that they just got to get off their
Sure.
chest the first 30 minutes.
Yep, for sure.
So from 8:30 to 12:30, our doors on do not disturb. And we already have a do not disturb on there, and sometimes it works well, sometimes lately, and Austin made this point, the managers tend to think it's not for them, even though we have a do not disturb, and then we also have an L team only, which is for meaning leaders can come in, but they've tend to ignore the do not disturb lately. So Austin is going to be the one that's going to go take care of it yourself type of thing. Go figure out the answer. You've got this, or come back at 12:30.
Yes.
And so I really truly feel like that will be what we need in order to take us to the next level, because there's so many things that both of us need to build and work on, and we can't because we're constantly being bombarded with people.
Yeah, exactly.
Situations.
Which is true whether it's in business or whether it's in life, right? Like there are things we want to work on and we say, okay, this is important. And we may even have great intentions, but if we don't create those healthy boundaries around it and communicate it to some other people, then yeah, there's always going to be something pushing over those fences, and we're going to feel like we get to the end of the day, the week, the month, the year, and we didn't have time to do that thing, or we didn't have enough time to really build up momentum. So I love that, and I know that you're really going to see a difference from in doing that. So yeah, that'll be good to talk about. And if you haven't already taken it out yet, there's a book hanger in the back of my book that you can put up that says, right, in case I can't say no, this sign will have to do it for me, you know, or like last week we talked about like, do not disturb, right? Like everything else is a distraction if I'm working on my one thing. So being able to stick that up, you know, on there.
We have a little spinny wheel on our door.
Perfect. Yeah.
So an available, do not disturb, an L team only, and a can it wait.
Oh,
so
like
the can it wait. Anybody could walk in, but
sure,
you know, this is something that can wait until we truly can focus on you. So those are our 4 options we have.
I love that. That's so good, right? And it's going to help people. I think it's going to help people become leaders of themselves as well, right? Because they're going to find, gosh, if I can't go to this person for an answer right now, I bet they probably could come up with an answer themselves. But maybe they weren't willing to take the time or effort. You know, what do we usually do? We go, I don't know, I'm just going to ask, right? And so we blurt it out and don't really take the time to go, you know, I already actually know the answer. Sometimes we just feel like we want that validation from someone else. So I think you're going to see, you know, a lot more leaders born in there as well, because they'll learn to lead themselves and lead the people around them when they don't have access to you guys. That's fantastic. I love that. I love that. And I also love this picture here of the iceberg. You know, we've all heard of icebergs. We all know the story of Titanic, right? Like you only see this one little bitty part, right? We see the productivity part, right? That's the part we see what stuff's getting done. But what he's going to build out in these next couple chapters is that in order for that to be there, like this part above the waterline wouldn't be here if it weren't for these 2 big sections down here. And notice these are wider, right? And larger than the productivity, you know? And so oftentimes what you see is determined by what you don't, right? And so it's being able to have that purpose in place, to know what my priorities are, and then that's going to lead to being productive. So let's jump into chapter 13 about living with purpose. And he starts off by telling the story of Scrooge, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with, right? And he says on page 136, he says, our destinies are determined by our decisions, and our lives are shaped by our choices. How do you see that to be true in Scrooge's life? Or more importantly, how do you see that to be true in your life? Our destiny is determined by our decisions, and our lives are shaped by our choices.
Really, because, you know, we have 2 pathways, sometimes more, but 2 pathways that we can do. I didn't have to start my second company, but I decided to go down that pathway. I didn't have to we didn't have to have children, but we had children. And so it's those decisions that we've made that has completely, you know, and even still, like right now, if I keep going this way, this is what is going to happen at the end. I can see it. What if a new pathway is presented? And what if God derails me onto a different pathway and I follow the pathway that he has given me? So
Yeah. It's almost like you remember the choose your own adventure books when we were kids, right? You'd read up to a certain point and then you had to choose. Do you either want to do A or B? And based on which answer you gave, then it would tell you what page to go to, and then you would read until you got to the next crossroads, and then and so you could end up in a very different place by the end of your book than your friend did by the end of their book, simply because each time you came to that crossroads, to that fork in the road, you were making a choice, right? And so it's so right, that oftentimes well, always where we are is based on the choices that we've made. And here's what I love, and you brought this in, like the role that God plays in this, right? It's not like, well, I'm way over here and that was the wrong path and God's way over here, unless it's like blatant sin and I'm totally disregarding him. Like that's a different thing, right? But I've now separated myself from him. But like, yeah, at any moment, God can cause someone or something to intersect my path and to bring an opportunity or to bring that decision point or to bring that realization or whatever. And so just because I'm on this path, like I don't always know when that's coming or everything about where this path is going, but I know that that God is faithful and he's walking with me, and he, if he wants, he's the one who's going to direct my path. So if there's another fork off that he wants me to go on, that's what's going to happen, right? So I love that. On page 138, this kind of reminds me of this. It says, purpose is a combination of where we're going and what's important to us. Purpose is a combination of where we're going and what's important to us, right? When we set our purpose, it sets our priority, and then our priority determines our productivity, And so when we go, okay, so where am I going? Right? I'm going towards a successful business because I believe this is what God's called me to do. I'm going towards having a really connected family because this is what I believe God has called me to. I'm going towards having a healthy body, or being a good steward of my finances, or having, a daily, walk with him, like whatever that is. It's knowing where we're going and what's important to us, which is going to tie into the story that he uses in the next chapter, which I absolutely love. So at first, Scrooge was all about, I'm going towards my wealth, right? And so when that was where he was going, what was important to him was how much more money can I put in my money pots, right? In my wallet, because I don't know that he had like ATMs and stuff, back then, but how much more can I stuff inside in my space so that I can get to where I want to go? And then everything shifted when he had this experience, right? When he had this experience and his priorities started shifting and his purpose started shifting. And now it no longer became about like getting myself to this wealthy place, but helping this man who means a lot to me and his family, who now means even more to me, for them to be taken care of and not just comfortable, but like actually doing well, and succeeding. And that just literally just completely changed the trajectory, of where he went. When his purpose changed, it says here at the bottom 138, after haunting, what happened to Scrooge? By Dickens' account, his purpose changed, which changed his most important priority, which changed where he focused his productivity, right? His purpose is no longer money, but it was people. And he now uses money to save people. And he's productive throughout his days by putting every penny he can towards others. So it says on 139, just beyond that, it says the transformation is remarkable, the message unmistakable. Who we are and where we want to go determine what we do and what we accomplish. How does that hit you? Who we are and where we want to go determine what we do and what we accomplish.
Really, it's those things that drive us to get things done. How determined are you to have those things? How determined are you to get where you want to go? For instance, if you want to lose 10 pounds, how determined are you? And if you're not determined, are you going to accomplish it?
Yeah, you may stick with it for a short period of time, right? But when the going gets tough, which we'll talk about in just a minute, you're probably going to bail on that goal because it's not comfortable. It takes work. I'd rather have
not seeing the results.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's really even like with businesses. That's why I feel like so many businesses fail as early as they do, because it takes time to truly make something of your business.
Yeah.
Most businesses don't just start and magically have lots of money sitting around in the bank with, what am I going to spend my money on? Most businesses aren't like that. My first 2 years of business here, like 2 years ago, I told my boys, I'm like, you will never work for me. I do not want you in the same business as us. And now I have both of my boys in there. I have a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they're both working for me now. And one
Mhm.
of them's talking about potentially being the CEO one day whenever I decide to step down. Like, and it excites me because 2 years ago, it wasn't exciting. I was determined we were going to make it work, but I couldn't figure out how exactly to get there. And now that I figured out how to get there and figured out where we're going and I see it and I'm determined to get there, I'm
Mhm.
like, no kids, come on, all of my kids, like even my kids overseas from when we did exchange students. I'm like, as of this year, if they want to come work here, we've reached that point according to the government that they can get a visa and come work for me now. Like, come
Wow.
on, kids, come
Yeah.
back home.
Yeah. But I love that because you knew who you were. You knew that God was calling you to be a business owner. Even when you weren't seeing the results, you stuck to that, right? You stuck to that piece of it. And you knew where you wanted to go, right? You wanted to get to the point where, yeah, you were seeing a return on your investment of your time. You were seeing money in the bank. You were seeing the longevity of this that you could invite your kids into. But if you didn't have that strong knowing of who you were and where you were going, you wouldn't have stuck through it those couple of years. And I think you've hit on something that's so right. Like so often we don't give it enough time. We give it a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, maybe even a couple of years, but sometimes things take a while and it can look like nothing's happening. I'm sure you've heard the story of like the bamboo, right? Like the bamboo, like if you watch it, like it looks like it's not growing at all for like 5 years. And then in year six, it grows like, I mean, it's like crazy, like 100 times or something like that. Its
Mhm.
height grows in the sixth year, and like, but if you would have given up on year 2, 3, 4, 5, you would not have, seen all of that. And I was actually just reading in Genesis this morning. I'm doing a chronological Bible reading study and plan, and they were talking about like how Jacob planted and God made it 100-fold in his what he sowed, what he reaped from what he sowed. And like that's where I think it comes down to knowing who we are, right? If God has called me to this, and I know where he's directing me to go in this, then I'm just going to remain faithful until he tells me otherwise, to keep going in that direction, even when I can't see, because I know that that it's gonna come, which I love. He goes on to this next little part, which I'm kind of curious just as to what your thoughts were on this. He talks about being happy, and he says happiness is what we most want, yet it's what most of us understand the least. No matter
Mhm.
our motivations, most of what we do in life is ultimately meant to make us happy, and yet we get it wrong because happiness doesn't happen the way that we think. What were your thoughts? Like, I'm just curious when you read that phrase that happiness is what we most want. Would you agree with that? Disagree with that? There's no right or wrong answer. Just kind of asking what.
No, I 100% agree with that. And I 100% don't. I believe that we do not know what true happiness is.
Mm,
We're too busy searching for the next best thing. We're too busy. What is the new kitchen gadget that I can buy that will make me temporarily happy? And what's the new phone that's out that will make me temporarily
mm,
happy? And we think that's happiness.
mm,
So like I started a journal at the beginning of the year and it asks the question, when were you most happiest or something along that lines? And I really truly struggled with that. I'm
mm.
like, I, do I actually truly, and that was what I asked myself, do I truly even know what happiness is?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm like, when I spend time with my kids, but then I sometimes want to strangle them. So am I really truly happy? Like I really
Yeah.
struggled with that
It's
question.
elusive, right? And you go into like he tells the story about the begging bowl, and he says our biggest challenge is making sure our life's purpose doesn't become a beggar's bowl, a bottomless pit of desire, continually searching for the next thing that will make us happy, because that's a losing proposition, right? It's
Hmm.
always this elusive thing. And when I think about happiness and I think about it from what the Bible teaches about it, I really think about more of it like joy, right? Joy is that deep sense of happiness. That's happiness, it feels like is very like on the outside. Yeah, like right now this is making me happy because these circumstances are aligned in such a way that, yeah, my kids and I are connecting, or yeah, this kitchen gadget saved me a whole bunch of time, or yeah, this phone is doing what I want it to do. But like you said, just as quickly as it makes us happy, we can be unhappy with it, or there can be something bigger, brighter, shinier, newer that makes us feel like, well, gosh, maybe I'm not happy with this anymore. Whereas that joy is like that inner thing here that these outside things can't touch, right? And that it's not going to be affected by the changing circumstances around. And I think that's really tied to our purpose, really knowing our purpose deep down inside. rather than just trying to grasp at things that are around us, hoping that, well, maybe this is it. Do you remember that book? Are you my llama? Are you my, and it was like this animal that would go around asking, like, are you my mama? And then,
Llama mama.
figure it out, right? Yeah. And so I think we do that with our purpose. Are you my purpose? Are you my purpose? Are you my purpose? Right. And it's just kind of this like grasping at things rather than that deep sense of knowing of who we are and whose we are, and then letting that, drive the things that we do. And here's what happens. And this is really interesting. The bottom 141, he talks about we wind up ricocheting from achieving and acquiring to acquiring and achieving without even taking time to fully enjoy any of it. Right? You can't, you're going to miss out on what you already have if you're always looking to something else. And so that I think that's something I think that really just, should get us thinking about, where am I finding my fulfillment? Where am I finding my happiness, my true peace, and my joy? Is it when my life is ordered, or is it when I have order in here, right? In my heart and in my spirit, and what that looks like. And it says here at the end of this section on page 143, happiness happens when you have a bigger purpose than having more fulfills, which is why we say happiness happens on the way to fulfillment. Fulfillment is like, seems like that deeper thing rather versus the happy that's kind of the elusive and wanting to have more in order to get there.
I feel that the part of the problem though is that we have been conditioned to not really look for a purpose. Like, we're here because our parents were here. We are this way because our parents were this way. This is how I was raised. This is how it's always going to be. And that is small thinking. And that was something lately, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was basically said small purpose comes from a small mind. Big purpose comes from big minds. And it's about reconditioning your thoughts that you don't have to be this way because your parents said that. You don't have to be this way because your teacher said that. It's about redefining yourself, redefining your purpose.
Yeah, just so true. And we understand who we are and whose we are. And we think about how big God is, right? And how big his purpose is, and finding ourselves in that big purpose rather than, like you said, my little blinders on, here's my little corner of the world, right? All I can see is what's inside my box. Like God is eternal, infinite, unchangeable in his bigger purpose, right? And wow, why do we then get so tunnel visioned and just looking at like what's right in front of us and what our little thing is? And so I think that's where, like just remembering who we are and whose we are, and that there is so much more than what we can just see right in front of us, and really just asking God to direct us in that way, and give us a heart and eyes to see that bigger purpose, right? That bigger purpose eternally, and also then what is our part in that, in the time that we have here, on this earth. So, and then moving towards it. So it says on page 143, the prescription for extraordinary results is knowing what matters to you and taking daily doses of action in alignment with it, right? Because it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, this is my purpose. Like if you, like, for example, Shayna, like, your purpose is to build a business, right? So you can know your purpose is to build a business, but if you're not taking daily doses of action towards doing it, okay, great. You can know what your purpose is all day long, but it's not going to make any difference, right? It has to be that, like, the two coupled together, that knowing with the doing, the purpose with the productivity part of it, because that's what starts moving us in that direction. So when you have a definite purpose for your life, clarity comes faster, which leads to more conviction in your direction, which usually leads to faster decisions. So purpose leads to clarity, leads to conviction, leads to decisions. And when you make faster decisions, then you end up making better, why you're the one who's making the best choices. And when you have the best choices, you have the opportunity for the best experiences. So it can lead us towards even bigger results. Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Which is so powerful, right? Like when you think about this, like how one triggers the next. It's like the domino effect that we've been talking about, like, that sometimes it's just knocking over that first domino, and then it's going to take us down that next place. But when we waffle in the indecision, we can usually go back and say, I'm probably not connected to that bigger purpose. Because when we're in indecision, I don't have clarity, right? And I don't have conviction about anything, then I'm just kind of grasping at straws. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and this was like, this is a thought I had a while ago too, and then you said it again. So the bigger purpose. So I think that there's different kinds of purposes too. There's a now purpose, and there is an in the future purpose.
Mhm.
And so like my now purpose is to build this business, but what's my future purpose? My future purpose is not to actually be in this business, but have
Mhm.
this business running enough that I'm not here, because I have a vision for other purposes of my life
Mhm.
that I can see God using me in.
Mhm.
But it's about what's my now purpose? What's my now purpose that's going to get me to that end
Mhm.
result purpose,
Mhm.
to get
Yeah.
me to the next
Which
purpose.
is what we're going to talk about in chapter 14. So hold on to that because we're going to hit on that in just a second. And that also ties into just one more thing I want to point out from this chapter before we move on is that purpose also helps when things don't go your way. Because when, like right now, your purpose that you see, like you just said, is building your business. But your bigger purpose, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20 years from now, it doesn't matter, right? Is that those other things that you know God wants you to do, that in order for you to do, you're going to have the structure of this business, right? Because it's bringing you the income or it's giving you flexibility or whatever, right? And so on those days when people are quitting, when people keep interrupting you, when you get the phone call that was the unexpected news, when you just don't feel like it, that bigger purpose of, okay, this is why I'm building this, that's what keeps you going through all those difficult
Mhm.
times. It says knowing why you're doing something provides the inspiration and motivation to give the extra perspiration needed to persevere when things go south, right? Like, how often do people just give up, right? When things go south, or, I'm starting to sweat here a little bit, little blood, sweat, and tears, maybe this isn't for me. And then I'm jumping ship and really in no better place. So it's the ultimate glue that can help you stick to the path that you've set, right? And then you're going to find when your purpose matches what you're doing, you have this rhythm in life, right? And it's just
Mhm.
like, you ever have that like feeling in you that you're just like, I know that I know that I know that what I'm doing, like in this moment right now, like it just feels like I'm in alignment. Like I'm in the place I'm supposed to be. I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do. And this just feels amazing. Now that we don't always stay feeling that, 24/7, but those moments, like grab onto those, right? And really pay attention to, why am I feeling this way? What is it about what I'm doing and how I'm serving or who I'm doing it with and how this relates to my bigger purpose that makes it feel like this is like that moment I want to freeze frame, right? And kind of stay in there and then let that drive you moving forward. So and then the one last thing I'll just point out, I love this because we keep coming back to the one thing question, right? And so he applies it on page 144. He says, when you ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do in my life that would mean the most to me in the world, such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary, right? This is that bigger one you were talking about, right? What's the
Mhm.
one thing? It's this really big thing. And then that's going to start, we're going to talk about goal setting to the now here in the next chapter. Now we start bringing it in to, okay, so now what do I do right now that is going to build up towards whatever that is? Or another way to say it, what is the one thing you want your life to be about more than anything else? Right? Like that's that bigger purpose. And it may be, like you said, like it may be like that's as big as I can see right now. And that's okay. That may get you a little ways down the road. And then you'll be able to see something bigger than that. And then you'll be able to see something bigger than that. Right. Sometimes we can't jump from where we are to like, to from 0 to 100, but we can go from 0 to 20 or 0 to 35, and then we can go from 35 to 80 or, like kind of make that bridge there. So pick a direction, start marching down that path. Or as my coach just told us the other day, she goes, pick a path, then bless and release all the other options that you've been indecisive over. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Like, okay, great. Make a decision and start moving forward. And guess what? Number one, God will lead you. And number two, your path is probably going to change or branch off, like we talked about earlier, at some point. So that's okay. Right. Like as long as we're staying in step with him, he is going to make sure that it comes over. It's not like, oh, I missed the train and I can't ever get on it. So we can always change your mind, right? Which I love that. I love that reminder. Cool. Okay, let's hop into the goal setting to the now because that's exactly what you were just talking about. Chapter 14. But I want to start with this story. I love this Alice in Wonderland story in the beginning. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to go, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. Right? Like, how often have you, maybe in the past, maybe even sometimes now, sometimes I get into this place, right? Or watch other people and they're just like, I don't really know where I'm going. So it really doesn't really matter what I'm doing right now. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt like you're like, either you or somebody else was kind of asking like, where should I go? What should I do? And you're like, well, where are you going? And I don't know. Well, probably doesn't matter then.
Yeah. No, it's an often conversation.
Yeah.
So
But
often. And sometimes, like where you're going and you just have these, am I going in the right direction? Is this
mm,
where I'm supposed to
mm,
go? So
mhm,
your
mhm.
question,
Yeah,
whether
which
it's
is okay.
parenting or marriage or business or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Keep checking in, right? Like that's good because you kind of want to keep checking. Am I in alignment? Am I in alignment with what God's calling? Am I in that? So I think that's a good, healthy place. I think it's the place we don't want to be is I don't know, like they say, if you're not going anywhere, then any road will get you there, right? So if you don't know where you're going, sure, take any road you want because it doesn't really matter. And that's not the place that we want to be. Because we aren't, just here to just kind of take up space and time and things like that.
Mhm.
Which brings us to a couple good questions on page 147. Here's some good questions to ask yourself, right? So when each day begins, we have a choice. We can ask, what shall I do? Or what should I do? Without direction, without purpose, whatever you shall do will always get you somewhere. But when you're going somewhere on purpose, there will always be something you should do that will get you where you must go. What do you hear is the difference between those two questions? The what shall I do or what should I do?
Um, I don't know. I feel like the shall is very indecisive.
Mm, mm,
And I can see why it would not have anything to do with your purpose.
yeah, right. Yep.
Where should it's
Mm-hmm,
more of a choice. You
mm-hmm,
have these things to
mm-hmm,
do. Which
mm-hmm,
one
mm-hmm,
should you do that's
mm-hmm.
going to get you there?
And I have a way to measure it because if I know my purpose, then I can answer that question based on my purpose, right? And I think that's really the key is like if I know what that purpose is, now I can start prioritizing. And I found this is really interesting when he went into talking about the word priority. It did not used to be plural. There was not a plural form of it when the word was first made originated back in the 14th century. It literally meant first. If something mattered the most, it was a priority. And what have we done, right? By the 20th century, what now priority means just generally something that matters, right? And we try and say, oh, yeah, I have all these priorities. And then we wonder why we're never really getting anywhere. And I'm not saying there aren't, important things, but maybe we need to kind of come back to what's my one thing, right? What is that one thing that really matters the most right now in this season? And really put our focus there because just like we've been talking throughout this whole book, when we try to chase two squirrels or 10 or 20, right, we don't catch any of them. We spread ourselves too thin. And so when we have all these priorities, are they really priorities, right? If I have 20 priorities, are those really priorities? How can they be? I do not have enough of me to go around to give all of them the exact same amount of attention. But if I have eight
Mhm.
or five or three or one, right? Like I can give it that focus. I can have other important things, but that priority is going to really get the most important thing. Okay, so this goes
So
into
here's
good.
a I was gonna say here's a good example. So your Easter egg hunt, and in the middle of the field is a golden egg. And if you have two ways of getting there, you can stop and pick up all the eggs along the way, or you can head straight and get the gold egg and then
Mhm.
go back and do the
Mm,
extra stuff.
yeah,
And
the other ones will still be there.
too many of us are picking up the other eggs on the way, and by the time we get there, the gold egg is gone. Somebody else has already got that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Or
this
we've given
little,
up. I mean, maybe it's still sitting
yep,
there. It may still be sitting there and nobody else has found it, but we're exhausted or we're distracted or we're off down on the wrong path where that gold egg isn't.
we want to see what's inside of our eggs that we have now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like my Skittles and oranges thing here, maybe our basket is already full, right? And it's like I would love to put the golden egg in there, but I don't have any more space for this now because I let so the Skittles are all like the little meaningless whatever
Hmm.
things of life, right? So if I pour the Skittles in this jar first and then try to put the oranges in, they will not fit. But if I put the
Right.
oranges in first and I pour the Skittles around it, it's amazing how it just like fills in the crevices and cracks and it all fits inside, right? So I
Hmm.
love the illustration of the Easter basket because I think that's so true that, yeah, what am I really going after here? Am I just kind of going after whatever comes my way, or am I really going for that thing of value, and what matters there? So on page 150, there's a great illustration. So I'll hold this up here for anybody who's not looking at a book of goal setting to the now, right? And kind of this, like what you were talking about earlier, going, okay, here's my someday goal. Someday, I don't have a date on this. Someday, what's the one thing I want to do someday? Okay, so that's like the big thing. And you dream as big as you can right now, knowing that one that could even get bigger, right? And then you back that up and say, okay, so that has to be beyond 5 years because the next one is the 5 year goal, right? So, okay, so based on my someday goal, what's the one thing I can do in the next 5 years, right? So, say your someday goal is you want to be able to travel, you know, to other countries, whether it's doing mission work or visiting your exchange students or, just time with your family and whatever, and not be tied to your business, right? So maybe that's your 10-year goal is just to be like, okay, I can walk away from my business at any time and just go travel and be gone for months at a time. So then the 5 year goal is, okay, so if I want to do that in 10 years or 7 years, what do I need to accomplish in 5 years so that I could start moving towards that? And then you back it up to your 1 year goal. So based on my 5 year goal, what's the one thing I can do this year? Right. And then I'm going to insert. So I even wrote in my book, because they didn't put this in here, but I'm a big believer in 12-week goals, which is essentially kind of like a quarter goal. Cause I think a year is really long to focus on. Most people don't have the stamina. It's like the long Easter egg hunt, right? When your kids were little, they didn't have the stamina to be out Easter egg hunting for, a whole hour, but they could probably do 15 minutes. They could do a fourth of it. Right. And I think sometimes we set these year-long goals and we're good with it for maybe the first month or two if we're lucky. Most people don't make it past the 17th of January. So let's be honest, we really have a short attention span, but what are the chances of someone being consistently focused towards that goal for an entire year, right? So if we break it down even smaller into 12-week goals, right? So what's the one thing in the next 12 weeks I can do? And then based on your 12-week goals, what's the one thing I can do this month? And then based on your monthly goal, what's the one thing I can do this week? Based on your weekly goal, what's one thing I can do today? And then right now, based on my daily goal, what's the one thing I can do right now? How do you see that process helping to take this really big purpose and goal, this someday thing that I have no idea how to get to and I can't map out on paper, down to helping you decide what you should be doing right now? That what should I do question.
Well, I think that it helps take the overwhelmingness. But it also, I feel like it can give you, if you think of it this way, it can actually give you the courage to get to that point. Like so many times you hear people say, I would do this if I had the money to do it or the time to do it. Okay. So, but then they put it on the back burner and they never truly ever accomplish it. So instead of putting it on the back burner, put it out. Like, I wish I could do this. I don't have the finances now or the time now or whatever it may be. But what would happen is if I put it on a 5 year goal? And then what are the steps that I need to take in order to get there?
It
I do
takes
know
a gap, right, between where you are and that maybe that 5 year or the someday goal, or even a 1 year goal that can feel really far away, right? And like you said, it helps break it down into, well, I don't exactly know how I'm going to get there in 5 years or even in a year, but I know what I can do in 3 months, and I can know what I'm going to do in 1 month, in 1 week, in one day, and then right now, right? And then, like you said, just make a very tangible step towards it. And then I think what it does is exactly what he says in 151. It starts connecting one goal with the next over time, until the most, it connects them all, right? So I don't have to know everything to do to get to the end goal, but by knowing what to do now, that can help lead me towards that and make me feel like I'm making progress, which then is going to start building momentum and confidence and all of that, okay, I can keep going and moving towards this.
Yep. I think the other thing is there's people that will say, okay, in 5 years, I want to do this, but yet they don't put a plan in place. And so come 5 years, they're not ready. Okay, so maybe 5 more years, I'll do it.
Have you heard my whiteboard story, my 5 year whiteboard story?
I don't remember.
I'll tell a really quick version of it. So my husband and I went for this getaway weekend. He'd just gotten home from being gone for a year on a really long work trip. And so we go away for this romantic weekend. He pulls out this whiteboard and we're going to write down our 5 year goals. And I'm like, bye, I've been alone with 3 kids for a year. I have no idea what I want in life. So all the goals on there were his. And we came back from the weekend and he had written all on this whiteboard, and that whiteboard went on top of this trunk that was sitting in the corner of our bedroom. And sure enough, over time, it kind of wasn't standing up anymore. It was laying down, and things got put on top of it. And I think it eventually got down on the floor, next to the trunk, right? And it was almost exactly 5 years later that my husband was like, hey, how are we doing with those 5 year goals? And we pulled that whiteboard out. And you know what? We were no closer to any of those 5 year goals than we were the day that we wrote them down, because like you just said, it was still just that someday. And we, number one, weren't keeping them in front of us. And number two, we weren't breaking them down into, okay, how can we start chunking this down and being intentional with this. And so it was just that great like lesson to me of, yeah, just saying someday or even putting a date on it, but then not backing it up to this goal setting to the now, right? This is goal setting to now connects today to all your tomorrows, right? Like, yeah, this is how you're going to get there, by having one today after the next that connect to where you want to be 365 tomorrows from today, or 1,000 tomorrows from today, or whatever that is. So lesson learned the hard way, and a lot of time wasted for us, but thankfully we're not in the same place anymore. Now our goals that we just set a couple weeks ago are like on the refrigerator, so we can see them every single day when we're standing there to grab something to drink or get something out, things like that. So yeah. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else from this chapter. Oh, there are two things I would just want to point out before we move on to the last chapter. I love this because on page 154, it reminds me of your employees that you were just talking about. He says, I have this dialogue with people every day. It's particularly effective when they ask me what they should do. Like, have you ever had an employee say, I don't know, what should I do? Or your kids say, what should I do? Or even yourself asking, like, what should I do? Right? It's like we want that validation, we want somebody else to tell us, right? And here's what he says to them. He says, I turn it around and I say, before I answer your question, let me ask you something. Where are you going and where do you want to be someday? And then without fail, when they get that picture, right, then they can walk through the goal setting to the now. They catch on quickly and come up with their own answers. And by the time they tell me the one thing that they should be doing right now, I laughingly ask, so why are you still talking to me? Right? Like, so often we already know if we actually would take the time and the process to ask the question to get there, and to ask that. And the other thing I found so interesting, I've read and heard this over and over again, the very last paragraph says, those who wrote down their goals were 42.1% more likely to accomplish them. 42.1% more likely, right? Like, yeah, so I've got sitting on my desk, I have this thing called a project journal. And I have 12-week goals in here. And so I've taken my 12 weeks and I divide it down to the 3 months. And then I have each week, and by keeping this in front of me, I'm getting more done in 12 weeks than most people get done in a whole year, 12 months, right? Or maybe even 12 years, because I'm staying focused on what it is that I'm doing, which is going to get me to that point, which is just a building block to the bigger goals, right? And other things that are happening. But when it's written down, and I'm still a check the box girl, there's something about that satisfaction of, yep. But I think it also just keeps it top of mind, right? When you can see it, and then then you can ask yourself, what am I doing to work towards this week? What am I doing to work towards this today? What am I doing to work towards this now? And then take action on that. Writing down your goals and your most important priority is your final step to living by priority. And then, this is so key, very last sentence of the chapter. And once you know what to do, the only thing left is to go from knowing to doing, right? I can't just write that down and let it sit on the corner of my desk and be like, okay, it's written down. Like, now you have to take that, we have to bridge. Okay, so here we get into the time blocking, right? Where we talk about productivity and the difference that it makes. And I love this in the beginning, this reminder that productivity describes what you want from what you do when the outcome matters. Productivity describes what you want from what you do when the outcome matters, right? So here's where it connects back to our purpose. So here's where I'm going to give him some grace and say, okay, we can use the word productivity as long as it's connected to our purpose, right? Otherwise, I'm saying purposivity. We are always doing something, working, playing, eating, sleeping, standing, sitting, breathing. If we're alive, we're doing something. Even if we're doing nothing, that's still something. Every minute of every day. The question is never, will we be doing something, but rather what that something is we'll be doing. Sometimes what we do doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. And when it does, what we do defines our life more than anything else. In the end, putting together a life of extraordinary results simply comes down to getting the most out of what you do when what you do matters. So, as I always say, like, you are creating results at every moment, whether you realize it or not. So when you are sleeping in the morning and hitting snooze over and over and over again, you are working towards creating your results. When you are, been grabbing the ice cream and the spoon and just eating right out of the carton, you are creating the results, whether you know it or not. When you're binging Netflix, when you're, whatever it is, like, and in the positive way too, every time that you are in the word and in prayer, you're creating your results. Every time that you're investing in your growth or in the growth of your business or the growth of a relationship, every time you go for a walk, right? Every time you, whatever, So always asking ourselves, is what I'm doing moving towards the results that I want or not? Because it's either one way or the other. There is no neutral, right? So it's either going to take you the direction you want to go or it's not. And letting that kind of be a good question there. Which means we have to be intentional, right? So let's take a few minutes just to kind of touch on this time blocking thing, because I think this is what you started us off with. And this is where we go, okay, if it really matters and I'm going to take action towards it, I have to create space. And here's what I loved, because you hear a lot of people talking about time blocking, right? And so he really kind of defines what this looks like. And I love this. He says, you need to do time block these three things in the following order on page 164. Number one, time block your time off. I found that so fascinating that he didn't say time block your most important things first. He said time block your time off first. Why do you think he said that?
Sorry, I had people talking
I
to
know
me.
you did. I know. That's okay. Sometimes I just ask questions out there.
Like, okay, so time block your time first.
Yeah, time block
right?
your time off first.
Time off first.
Mm-hmm.
See, I have a hard time with that. Like, here's the problem. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And too many of us put more time and invest more time in other people. And so if we don't give us that time off, we will never give us our time off. Or if we do, it's not enough. It's not truly what we truly need.
Yes, yes, right? Because it's like, oh, if there's leftover, I mean, especially as a mom, especially as a wife, especially as a business owner, as a friend, and we put on all the hats we put on all day, and who really has time left over at the end of it for ourselves, right? Like that was the mode I was in before. It was like, well, if there's time left over at the end of the day, then I will invest in me. I'll do something for my wellness or my well-being or my health or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, time gets filled with something all the time. So if we don't put those things in first, then it will fill up with something else. And it's really interesting. I'm doing a Bible study right now, and we were just talking about creation. We've been going through Genesis, and we were talking about the fact that God created the earth, right? Man and woman were not made till day 6. And what did they do on their very first day of life? So they were made on day 6. God created everything good. And what did they do on day 7? They rested. Yeah, they didn't work, right? It wasn't like I work my 6 days and then I earn my day of rest. They rested first, because God could have created them on day 1, or God could have said, okay, work for the next 6 days and then I'm going to teach you how to rest. But he didn't do that. He had them rest first, because rest doesn't have to be earned. Rest is something that we have been created to need, right? We need to fill up so that we can pour out. So I love the fact that he put that in there, because I think most women are on that same place of, yeah, I'm not in my calendar, whether it's the little things of I'm just taking time to read the Bible, or I'm getting my nails done, or maybe it's going on a date night. How many times, do we say, oh yeah, we need to go on a date night. Oh yeah, we need to, right? And for us, it would be like months and months and months would go by, and then finally we do it, right? Like, so now I'm just being intentional, and that goes on the calendar first. Oh yeah, we need to get away, right? We just haven't gotten away because life's just been busy, and so just block it out now. Like, put it on even if you don't know where you're going to go, block off the time. And guess what? Then you start saying, whenever a request comes for that time, sorry, like I just reached out to my sister-in-law about coming to something. And she's like, we already have the dates set that we're going to be going away over that time. And I was like, oh, where are you going? She's like, actually, I don't know yet, but we've already marked off those dates, right? So she knew that she was saying no to everything else, because now sometimes something happens and, it's super important. And so you can shift your dates, but we'll talk about that in a minute, what you do with that when something comes up. Okay. So the first one is time block your time off. All right. So that's going to be our challenge. Is to put us and our family time off on there first, right? Okay. Number 2 is to time block your one thing. And I love this quote that's like in red on the bottom of 165. Day, noun, a period of 24 hours, mostly misspent, right? Because what do? We just start putting out fires, right? We just start reacting or responding to everyone that knocks on our door, or every little notification or ding that comes in on our phone, or every idea that pops up in our head. And do we really get towards the things that are really most important? Not really, right? So that's why we want to put our block on first. And here's that challenge, right? A 4-hour block. Like, what? I even wrote like over in the side. I'm like, 4 hours a day, question mark, exclamation mark, question mark. Like, and he says that's a minimum. Yeah. If you can do more, then do it. Right? Why do you think sometimes we have that fear of like giving something that much time in our day? Like, have you ever felt that like, oh gosh, I can't, this isn't, I want to do this, but I couldn't give it 4 hours.
I think it's more mental thought. Like, how can I give this much
Mm,
time?
yeah.
How can I be away from everything else for that long? Um, the people around me need me.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
If they
First of
need you, then
all,
you need to start training them to be leaders into it themselves.
exactly. And I love that he even said here, he goes, within a week, this lady has started doing it because she always had these drive-bys, people that would, keep popping in. He says, within just a week, everyone became accustomed to the fact that for regular periods of time, she would not be accessible. They adjusted. It took a week, not a month and not a year, right? A week. Meetings got rescheduled and life went on, and she experienced a huge leap in productivity. So I love that. Like, no matter how many people you think need you, you can do this, right? And a couple of things like he talks about. Number one, the key to making this work is to block time as early in your day as you possibly can. And here's where he brought in something you talked about, like give yourselves 30 minutes to an hour to take care of morning priorities and then move to your one thing. So the way that I do mine, I have my morning refill, I call it first, which is my movement time, my coffee and God time, and my, getting ready, self-care time. So that is like, I don't see that as part of my day. That's just like, if I don't do these things, I'm going to be empty and I can't pour out, right? If I don't do these things. But then what I do is I have built in a power hour. So from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. is my power hour, where if I have any, household things I need to quick take care of, if I have any messages I need to respond to, if I have any emails I need to do, and I actually created a workflow. So it's not a to-do list, but it's just a series of things that I kind of go in and double check. Yep. Okay. Okay. Yep. This has already gotten my attention. This has gotten my attention. So that way those things aren't going to be a distraction. And then starting at 9 o'clock, like you were talking about, you're starting at 8:30, right? Now kind of those little daily things have gotten their space and time so that my brain is not thinking about that. Now I can focus on my one thing, right? And give it that block of time. And here's what I'm going to recommend. Don't sit in one place for 4 hours, even if you do put 4 hours. First of all, let me step back. If you feel like right now 4 hours is like, oh my gosh, there is no way I could find 4 hours. Well, simplest way to do it, start with 4 minutes. Like literally anyone can find 4 minutes, right? But give yourself an hour, right? And then let that grow to an hour and a half and grow to 2 hours. And I think you're going to find as you really look at where your time is being spent, what's the best return on my time? Are there things I'm doing that don't have a good return on investment? That are really, my coach is really teaching me right now, how do I minimize the things that really aren't moving me forward? Why am I wasting my time, energy, and resources, and even like thoughts on stuff over here that like it's just sucking, like social media, right? That just is like a suck of time and energy and everything else, right? Like, why am I wasting time over there? That's taken away from this, or putting that before what's important, right? And so you can build up to 4 hours. So that's one thing. It's like build up there. But whatever time you do, like, don't make yourself, okay, I'm sitting here and not moving for 4 hours. Like, I love doing the Pomodoro method. So I set an alarm on or a timer on my phone for 25 minutes. I super focus on like, I'm like, okay, so I ask the question, what's the one thing I can do right now in this next 25 minutes? It's going to make the biggest difference, right? Or make everything else easier or unnecessary when it comes to my one thing. And then that's all I'm focusing on. And when that timer goes off, I take a 5-minute break. And there are three things you do. You move, you drink water, and you look out into this distance, because those three things will reset your brain and your body, right? And so it's still within my 4 hour block. And then I can go, okay, and I ask the one thing question again. What's the one thing right now that I can do for the next 25 minutes that will make everything else easier, unnecessary, or better? Right. And so don't feel like, oh my gosh, a 4 hour time block. I'm just going to have to sit in my chair for 4 hours. Like help your body and your brain to be able to focus. But try and eliminate as much distractions as you can. You're going to laugh because there's a podcast episode that's coming out in a couple of weeks. And literally, as I was working on it, I got interrupted over and over and over again. And it was about how to respond to interruptions. And I was like, God, are you funny? That like literally my husband, called and messaged and needed something because he just landed from a trip away and needed something before he got driving home. And then my daughter called from college. You never know when she's going to call and when she needs. And then my mom, I'm like, okay, so I'm like getting a little, and then literally within like 5 minutes, my mom called. And so I was just like, okay, Lord, right here, I have this time block. This is what I'm working on, and so how do we handle those interruptions? And he kind of talks about how to do that when it gets to the end here. But anything else you want to say about kind of like just first of all, putting on your calendar and putting that 4 hour block or whatever hour that looks like?
I don't think so.
Well, I think the key is to do it. And I thought this is really interesting. Page 168, he says, like, what I like to try to do is I try to like block things in a time when there's less interruptions, right? So for me, it's the morning. I'm much more focused. I don't have as many things that need my attention at that time. Maybe my husband's at work. If you have kids, they maybe at school. I have a friend who asked a question within our community because she's been showing her house. So she's like, "What happens if I just get this random call and somebody's showing the house?" I'm like, "What if you make some of your time block like before 9 a.m.?" Right? Because nobody wants to come look at a house before 9 a.m. So chances are less that somebody's going to call at 7 and say, "I want to see your house in 10 minutes." But come 11 o'clock in the morning, yeah, you might get a question that somebody, an opportunity for somebody to come see your house. So kind of think about your day and when are you best and when are interruptions maybe at a minimum. And you can't control all of it, right? So you're still going to have to do some of the things we talk about at the end. So the third thing before we get to that is time block your planning time. Make sure that you have a slot on your calendar when this is your time to look ahead for the week. So we do this as a community at the beginning of the month. So the next one actually that we're doing is on February 7th. I actually had to move it till Tuesday because I will be out of town on Monday and I do not know what time I'm going to get home that night. So we're going to do it on February 7th, where we preview our week and we use the focus system to make sure that we're looking ahead at what that month holds. Sorry, we preview our month, not our week. So we look ahead at what the month holds and even at what the next month holds. So we can be anticipating what I need to do now, right? And not wait till March. And then it's on you then each week, take that same focus system and use that each week. I like to do mine on Sunday mornings when the house is totally quiet and I can just kind of like lay out my week. And I'm working on some resources to help you guys do that as well. But I can lay out what it looks like and I can make sure I've got those important blocks scheduled ahead of time. I have my downtime scheduled ahead of time. I have other important priorities, scheduled in there. And, will my week happen 100% like I have it written out on paper? No. In fact, I do mine in pencil just in case. But, life is always like things are going to happen. But when you have a plan and you've taken time to plan, you will find that you are able to execute way more of it than if you just kind of like leave it to chance. So make sure you block time to plan. And then the last thing they talk about is protecting your time block, right? Because things are going to come up. And here's what I love. This is like one of the most impactful things I read on page 170. It says, although time blocking isn't hard, protecting the time block you've blocked is. So whether it's a 4-hour time block or a 4-minute time block, this applies. Listen to this. The world doesn't know your purpose or priorities and isn't responsible for them. You are, right? So it's your job, listen to this, to protect your time blocks from all those who don't know what matters most to you. So everybody on the other side of that door, if the door is closed with a sign, or everybody, on the other side of the phone, they don't know your priorities. So that's why you can turn your notifications off or put your phone in another room or whatever, right? And I love this part. And from yourself when you forget, right? How often are we the ones that are knocking over those boundaries that we put around our time block, right? And so I thought that was really powerful. Sometimes it's usually the people outside, but a lot of times it's what's going on right up in here. And so they talked in here about like how you can gracefully say no. If somebody's trying to, schedule something during a time block, or give some other options, or if you absolutely must put it in that time block that you scheduled, then if you erase, you must replace, and then you just reschedule your time block. So that kind of takes us to the end here, right? And I love this. I said this to my husband this morning. I said, until your one thing is done, honey, everything else is a distraction. Because he was like looking at like all the things that needed to be done. And he had already told me what the one thing was that mattered most that he had to do. And I'm like, get that done first. And then you have the rest of the day to go do all those other things. Right. And to make that happen, I'm still getting him to like actually write it out and, like have a plan like that. But at least if I can help ask some of these questions, it's helpful. And here's a great question, 173. Again, the one thing question that's tied to our time block. What's the one thing I can do to protect my time block every day, such that by doing it, everything else I might do will be easier or unnecessary? Yeah, right. Because once you start creating those patterns, okay, this is me going into my time block, and so does everybody else out there, right? They now know, oh, if the door is closed, this is what this means. Oh, if the sign is up, this is what this means. Oh, I know generally around this time she's doing this. So maybe I'm going to think twice before I reach out, So it's up to us to protect ourselves from people who don't know and from ourselves when we forget. That was a lot in there, but good stuff, right? So what's the one thing of what we've talked about today? What's the one thing that you're like, this one nugget will make everything else easier and necessary or better.
Well, like I said at the beginning, it's that 4-hour time block.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that.
It's what's going to take us to the next level with the business.
Right? Because it's going to get that concentrated time and get your best focus and attention instead of the leftovers. And here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. And I will, this is, as I'm building out the Redeem Her Time program, this is going to be a part of it, is like, how do we create routines and workflows like inside that? So when you sit down to your 4-hour block, you're not like, I don't know what to do. Right. And then waste half the time trying to figure out where you should be or where you left off from last time. Like, what if you actually had, like, okay, this is my system. So I don't have to overthink it. All I have to do is block the time. And then I open this up and boom, it's right there. And I'm ready to pick up right up where I left off. So that way we can be, efficient with that time and make the most of it. So, okay, awesome. Well, we are right at the top of the hour and we are almost to the end of the book. So my original plan was to do 16 and 17 next time, and then do 18 on its own. But 18 is kind of a short chapter. So I think we're just going to do 16, 17, 18 together so that we can be ready to move on. So our next book club is February 13th at 12 o'clock Central Time, and we'll do chapters 16 through 18. So we'll finish out the rest of the book, which will be really great. And I really believe this has been one that like sits on my desk here that I can pick up as a reference because it comes back to. And what we're moving towards next is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. He is a pastor who writes about how to stay emotionally healthy and spiritually alive in the chaos of the modern world. And it's going to go perfectly with heading into a challenge that we're going to be doing in the for the 40 days leading up to Easter. And just how do we intentionally, ruthlessly eliminate hurry in our life, right? And all the other stuff. I think as we go through this book, it's going to help us better do this book. Because the reason people are like, I can't do one thing is because I've got too many things, right? I don't have enough time for one thing because I'm hurrying around doing everything else. So this is going to really build on top of this to help us kind of really say, how can I eliminate this always feeling like I'm hustle and hurry and, scurrying around all the time so that I can focus on my one thing. So
your Start Focus monthly call is still showing that it's on Monday. Online.
Okay, thank you. That was probably before I knew the dates that we were going to be coming back.
So it's going to be the 7th Tuesday at noon, correct?
It'll be the Start Focused is in the evening. What I found
in the evening
at 6. Yeah, just because it seemed like there were a lot of some people can't do during the day if they're working or whatever. So I don't need to make a different time. Everybody who put input in about when they're available so far, the times we've picked have been where most people have said they were available. So my goal is as we start the next book and as we come up to that we'll be able to spread the word to more people to come join us. So thanks for being on today. I'm excited to hear how your 4-hour block goes. And it's okay too. Like if you do a 2-hour block at one point and then you have to put time and attention to something else, especially if you have littles around the house and you're like, I can't go hide in my room for 4 hours, right? Like, yeah, that may not be possible, right? So maybe you do 2 hours at this time of the day and 2 hours at this time of the day. Maybe it's not always in one chunk, but how can you start working towards giving a good chunk of time towards your one thing, towards that thing that's going to make the biggest difference? And you'll be glad because it's going to eliminate the things that don't matter, right?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Well, keep me posted. I'm excited to hear. Thanks for being here today. And thanks for all you guys who watched the replay. And I'd love to hear what you guys are working on, what nugget you pulled out today. So make sure you drop that in the comments. And the whole goal is not just to know it and read it, but for us to actually do it. So have a fantastic rest of your day. Go get your one thing.